Hey folks, Gway. My name's Ed Travers. My pronouns are he, him, and his. I'm an Anglican priest serving in the beautiful parish of St. Margaret of Scotland that sits on the ancestral and on the unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. Gway. Okay, so last week, J.D. Vance made a statement about the school shooting in Georgia, where 4 people lost their lives and 9 people were injured. Bullets ripped through these people. Lives were changed. Families are grieving. Not only are they grieving those who passed, those who were killed, but they're grieving the injured. Again, some of these people will be changed forever, whether it's physically, mentally, emotionally. There are families grieving the loss of security. This place that used to be safe is no longer safe. Putting my kids on a bus, well, there's more to it now. This violence that erupted in that school, it changes. It changes how people in that area will think. It changes how I think here. Last week, on the first day of school, there was a shooting in my neighborhood, just literally like 2 blocks away. And thankfully, my kids were home at the time. And it wasn't a school shooting, but the schools, as part of their security measures, they went into a lockdown. I forget what they call it, but it was like a lockdown drill to keep everybody safe. Right? They told all the parents, if you haven't sent your kids to school, don't send them till we tell you, because there was a shooting in my neighborhood. That changes us. It changes us, and in change there is grief, and there is mourning, and there is anxiety and concern. So J.D. Vance, while talking about this latest school shooting, or the latest school shooting we've heard about, this latest mass shooting that has grabbed national and international attention, he said this: I don't like this. I don't like to admit this. I don't like that this is a fact of life. But if you're a psycho and you want to make headlines, you realize that our schools are soft targets, and we've got to bolster security at our schools. I don't like this. I don't like to admit this. I don't like that this is a fact of life. There's a couple of things about this that bother me. Number one is that there's no solution offered here. I know what he goes on to say, that we got to secure our schools. We've got to turn them into fortresses. He doesn't use those words, but the idea is that we've got to secure our schools. We got to make them places where if somebody wants to commit an act of mass violence with a semi-automatic weapon or whatever kind of weapon they can get their hands on, that this is not a place where they can do those heinous things. That a school is a place that it can actually defend itself against those forces of evil. The problem is that while it may solve the problem of school shootings, if you're someone who really wants to do that kind of damage, you're just going to go to the next soft target. So maybe that's the mosque or the synagogue. Maybe that's the church. Maybe that's the mega church just down the road. Maybe it's the mall, some store. Maybe it's a park, a parade, a festival. You're going to find the next soft target. Predators are going to go where predators can eat. So you're not solving the true problem. You may be solving the problem of mass shootings in schools, but you're just passing the buck. Sending it down the road, making it somebody else's problem. Something that somebody else has to figure out. But the thing about this statement that really bothers me, apart from just the fact that it's not solving the problem, The thing that bothers me about it is he seems resigned that this kind of event is a fact of life. Not necessarily school shootings, but shootings. Moments. Mass murder events is a fact of life. It doesn't have to be. I mean, violence. I hate to admit this, but violence is something that has been with us and will be with us. It is. There are many, many, many causes of violence. All of it incredibly consequential. The problems that violence creates are immense and much more of much more significance than the problems that has created the violence. And by that I mean the problems that lead a person to violence create many, 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 many more problems throughout the world, throughout the community, throughout those who are impacted by it. It's never isolated. It's always cascading, exponential in its growth. But we can do things. We can do things to mitigate the consequences of the violence. We can do things to limit the number of people who are impacted. We can do things that limit the extent, the magnitude of the violence. We can do things that limit how much violence a person in a moment can commit. That is possible. But it's not possible if leadership, a senator, a vice presidential candidate, just decide to accept this as a fact of life. If we choose to accept something as a fact of life, we become resolved to it. Oh, well, you know what? That's just the way it is. Okay, I'll just accept it. Deal with it. Nothing I can do to change it. Why spend time? Why spend energy? Why spend my talent on a Herculean task that is indeed beyond even Hercules? It's just a fact of life. But again, it doesn't have to be. We as human beings, the incredible creature that we are as human beings, we have the ability to change the things we want to change. We do. We have the ability to change, to work to change things that matter to us. We have the ability to work to change things that we have decided are not acceptable. We have the ability to change things that we are not resolved to accept. That's what makes us so amazing. It's what makes us so wonderful. It's what makes gives human beings the ability to achieve the things that we've achieved. I really like orange juice. Well, I can't get orange juice here in Nova Scotia during the wintertime. Hey, we've invented Tang. What? Tang? Okay, well, it's probably a bad example. Necessity is the mother of all invention. But when people say things like this, when people say things like, I don't like this, I don't like to admit this, I don't like it that this is a fact of life, it tells the world that this is something we should just be resolved to. Changing it isn't going to happen, and therefore spending our time worrying about it, spending our time trying to fix it is unnecessary. It's a waste of our time. It's a waste of our treasure. It's a waste of our talents. But the truth is, in most of the world, in most countries, especially in the West, we have put things in place, policy, laws, that has reduced the extent the violence that a person can commit in one moment. We have put things in place because it's not acceptable. And we have refused to become resolved to it. We have refused to accept this as a fact of life. Here in Nova Scotia, we had a mass shooting, the largest mass shooting in Canadian history, only a few years ago. When it was over, the province was horrified. Every person in this province was horrified, and every person in this province, I think, was changed to some extent. And in our country, in Canada, every person was horrified and I believe changed. And we deemed it to be unacceptable. This must never happen again. This kind of thing must never happen again. And we studied it. We had a commission on it. And we looked at everybody's involvement. We looked at the shooter. We looked at the shooter's family. We looked at the RCMP and how the RCMP responded. Where did they do well? Where did they drop the ball? We looked at all kinds of things. And not just on the day of. We looked at how was this person known? Who was this person? Where did he come from? How was he built? We asked the questions of how did he get here? We asked the questions about how did the RCMP and policy get to where it is? And for what it's worth, with all the answers that we've gotten, we're still not happy with it. We're still not happy that we've gotten everything we need from that study. There are still questions that are begging to be answered. And the public is demanding to be answered. This is not something that we're resolved to. It is not something that we have said, well, it's just a fact of life. Nothing about this was acceptable. Your leaders may come forward and say things like that. Your leaders may come forward and say, this is just a fact of life. I don't like it. I hate it. I don't want to admit it, but this is just a fact of life, so get over it. You don't have to accept that. Because even though they may not want to do anything about it, even though they may be resolved to it, even though changing the way things are may adversely impact them or their bottom line, you don't have to accept it. And you can choose. You can choose to put your trust in new leaders. Give authority to new leaders. Raise up leaders who also don't think this is acceptable, who also don't believe that mass shootings, acts of mass violence and destruction are just a fact of life. May the Lord bless you. May the Lord keep you. May the Lord's face be made to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord's countenance be lifted up to you. May you always know the peace of being in the Lord's presence. I pray we will never accept an atrocity as a fact of life. Amen. Nemultus.